So, Mark, you were saying that you've got one of your goals is to hit 100 million people that you want to influence, you want to touch with your work.
Yes.
Is that something that you have always had that as a goal, or is that something that has kind of evolved as you've developed your business?
No, it's evolved for sure. I started out wanting to reach 1 million people on my blog. Within a year or two, I realized that was going to be, I wouldn't say an easy goal, but that was going to come up pretty quickly. And so I added a 0 to that.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, my mission was to affect the lives of 10 million people through my teachings. And the way I wanted to measure this was I wanted to allow people a means by which they could access better health and take themselves off the medical conveyor belt and off the insurance system that has become such a abject failure in the U.S. And that meant, learning how to eat right and how to move right and how to sleep and how to manifest excellent health without the requirement of a physician.
FC2O. From chaos to order. From chaos to order. Here we go. From chaos to order. From chaos to order. FC2O.
Hello and welcome to FC2O with me, Matt Wallden, and my guest today, Mark Sisson. Now, I'm feeling very honoured to have Mark joining us on FC2O. Mark's the author of numerous books, including The Primal Blueprint, which was credited with turbocharging growth of the primal paleo movement back in 2009. In 2017, he became a New York Times best-selling author with the Keto Reset Diet, which reached the #1 overall bestseller among all books on Amazon for 2 days. So that's quite an incredible achievement. Now, Mark's also written several other books, including the popular primal-themed cookbooks and lifestyle books. He's the publisher of marksdailyapple.com, the #1 ranked blog for over a decade in the health and fitness category, and he also started the very popular Primal Blueprint podcast, which I'm featuring on very soon, so look out for that. Now, Mark's the founder of Primal Kitchen and Primal Nutrition as well, and you can learn more about that at primalkitchen.com and primalblueprint.com. We also have a very generous offer for our FC2O listeners from Mark at the end of the podcast, so stay tuned for that. Show notes and imagery are available at mattwalden.com under the podcast tab. So here we go. Welcome to the From Chaos to Order podcast with myself, Matt Wallden, and with Mark Sisson today. So, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, man. This is going to be fun today, I think.
Yeah, I think it will. I've followed your work for a while. I think, when we first were chatting a few months back, I was saying that, in the early days when I first was looking up paleo, there were very few people out there that were actually covering it, but you were one of those people. And so you've been in it right since the beginning. So I'm really interested to understand what it was that led you into the whole paleo journey and, your sort of background leading into becoming this kind of, icon of primal living.
Sure. Was always interested in health and fitness from a very early age, and tagged onto that, I was also interested in longevity, which made me a really weird, nerdy kid. But from reading books on health and how to get stronger, how to get fitter, how to live longer from the ages of 12, 13, 14. Sort of tangentially, I found myself jogging to and from school just as a means of beating the bus, conserving time and being more time efficient with my own life. So between the jogging to and from school, which put in about 3 miles a day total of quote training, and my interest in human performance and longevity, and I started reading books on diet and how to maximize performance using diet. Of course, the conventional wisdom in those days, and now we're talking the late 1960s, the conventional wisdom was to consume a lot of carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, grains, in order to fuel all of the miles that you were putting in. And then coincidentally, Ken Cooper came out with his book in 1968, I believe, called Aerobics, and sort of spawned this whole movement that in the U.S. manifested itself as the distance running movement. So people started putting in they started jogging and started running marathons and started training with the understanding, or at least the belief, that doing so would confer some sort of longevity, some sort of benefit to their heart. And, that made sense to me in the context of what I knew to be true. So I started running more, and I started eating a lot of carbohydrates, and I started entering races and performing actually quite well. And before you know it, I'm one of the top endurance athletes in the U.S. by the end of the late 70s. And I looked pretty fit on the outside. I was on the cover of Runner's World magazine 3 times, and I had, I manifested this exterior that seemed to look like it was a strong, fit body. But on the inside, I was really falling apart. I was starting to get osteoarthritis in my feet. I was getting tendonitis and tendinopathies throughout my body, primarily in the hips. I had an irritable bowel syndrome, which was horrible and pretty much dictated hour to hour what I did throughout my day. I had upper respiratory tract infections 6 or 8 times a year because my immune system was shot. I had gastroesophageal reflux disease. I had hemorrhoids. I mean, it was like I'm like a total wreck.
Yeah.
And here I was, this kid who had started out with the intention of being healthy and living longer. And the next thing you know, I'm this performance beast, who's turning out some pretty good running times and eventually some triathlon times, but is literally falling apart on the inside. So I kind of had to take a step back and I mean, I had to, because I had to quit training at that high level. I just could not do it anymore with my osteoarthritis and my tendinopathy. So I just kind of rededicated my life in my late 20s and early 30s to figuring out how I could be all those things I said I wanted to be: strong and lean and fit and healthy at the same time, without all that pain and suffering and sacrifice and all the stuff that I thought you had to do in order to achieve those. Yeah. And what happened was I started reading, as the research in health kind of shifted a little bit and it kind of started to open up a little bit more broadly. I'd been very interested in evolution in college. I was a pre-med candidate in college. So I thought I wanted to be a doctor at some point. But I started to understand that evolution had a strong bias in achieving good health. And so I started to go down this path of evolutionary biology and looking at ways in which we evolved and how maybe that the genes that we were using to express ourselves on a minute by minute basis every day, maybe they were expecting some different inputs from what I was giving them. So that's really kind of what got me headed down that paleo path.
Right. Yeah. And so what was actually your event? Did you have a specific event that you trained for, or was it a range of events?
So I was training for the Olympic marathon trials. The U.S. Olympic trials in 1980 was sort of the ultimate goal that I had in mind. And I qualified for the U.S. trials. However, I was just, by the time the trials event rolled around, 2 things happened. Number one, the president, Jimmy Carter, at the time decided we weren't going to go to the Olympics. Yeah. And so that was sort of a shallow, victory for whoever won it. And then I was so beat up. I went from running 120 miles a week in my prime training years to only being able to run about 40 miles a week because of the pain. And I just said, look, this is just as ridiculous. And so I had to sort of quit. But the marathon was eventually became my main event. Although from there, I still could not get it out of my mind that I needed to do something in the field of endurance. And even with my injuries, I was able to shift over to triathlon. So I did Ironman triathlon a couple of times because I could ride a bike, without the pounding on the joints. And I would say I could swim, but I was a horrible swimmer. So
excellent. Did you see this as a pattern? Because obviously you must have been mixing with a whole raft of athletes in a similar sort of training regime and nutritional focus as you. Was that something you saw as a pattern amongst your sort of colleagues and competitors?
Well, I certainly saw way too many injuries, and most of them were they were connective tissue injuries, which is going to which we will use to segue into the papers that we just produced. But the connective tissue injuries were, in my case, the osteoarthritis. But a lot of my friends would have these tendinopathies, whether it was plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendons. Chondromalacia was the sort of knee misalignment that may or may not have been an artifact of the new shoe design that was entering the world in those days, as Nike was coming out with these really thick cushion shoes that would sort of bias your foot toward pronating. But the other thing that I did notice, a lot of people who would get sick a lot, like upper respiratory infections. It was almost this sort of self-directing, self-limiting situation where if you trained too hard, the body just said, "Hey, man, I'm going to make you take 4 days off. I'm going to trash your immune system. You're going to get some sniffles and a cough and a scratchy throat, and you're going to have to take 4 days and not run." Because in those days, it was like you had to run. You ran every day. Maybe there was a day off once in a while, but a day off might have been an easy 10K, right? At 630 miles, instead of a day at 15 or 20 miles.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what the naturopaths call a healing crisis, where the body literally, throws you into this crisis to try and recover a little bit, right?
Sure.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Well, look, the theme of the podcast, as we've discussed, is from chaos to order, and one of the things I've found with the paleo understanding of things is that it does create some level of order and understanding from the chaos and the kind of complexity that's out there. And I'm wondering, obviously having been on this path for a long time yourself, I imagine there's a number of things that you've picked out on your journey where you think, well, actually, there's all this kind of complexity around a given topic. And actually, the answer is often quite simple if you follow paleo principles. So have you got any examples or experience with that?
Occam's razor, baby. I've got a lot of examples. I think the more time I sort of sit back and take a 30,000 foot view of life these days, the more I realize that we have huge amounts of chaos throughout civilization right now, and most of it is unnecessary. The primary example I can think of would be, just medicine in general. The fact that perhaps 80 to 90% of all medical issues, certainly people who present themselves at a hospital or at a doctor's office or at an emergency room, at least in the U.S., do so as a result of choices they've made, lifestyle choices. They've either become overweight from inappropriate dietary choices. They're stressed out from just an inability to handle stress or from layering on way too much stress in their lives. They might be, osteopenic. They might have, bone density issues. They might have increased risk markers for heart disease as a result of inflammation. Yeah. And if you go through the litany of all of the ailments that insurance covers in the U.S., most of them have some lifestyle etiology. In fact, most of them have some dietary etiology, but even a larger sphere would have just some dietary etiology, even if it's like not getting enough sleep. So as we look at the chaos of our lives today, and we say, well, first of all, chaotically, there's way too much access to food, and most of it's processed food. If the fix there is so simple, and it's to go back to a Paleolithic diet. And I don't want to, invoke the caveman, iconic, kind of hunter-gatherer and suggest that we should all emulate that, but to look at what our genes expect of us in the way of real food, unprocessed food. A study just came out the other day I didn't look at the study, but I saw the headlines in the New York Times, so take that with a grain of salt. But but it suggested that processed food, the study actually looked at processed food as a primary diet in some people's lives, and they were it was adding a few pounds every month to their lives. And so this is just the fact that the food has been, become hyper palatable. The nutrients, the macronutrients break down much more easily and therefore are assimilated much more easily and therefore are stored as fat much more easily. So if we look at diet, we can go back to a Paleolithic prescription, if you will, that would suggest that if we eat real food, we avoid processed food, we avoid processed industrial seed oils, we avoid added sugars and things like that. A lot of the things that ail us that are causing pain and suffering would go away. We can look at sleep. Sleep, we have a chaotic lifestyle in terms of access to events. Like there's so much going on in our lives, so much entertainment, so many things to do. Artificial light that keeps us up at night allows us to stay awake, allows us to, then we have this recent thing we call FOMO, fear of missing out. If I go to bed at 10 o'clock, I'm going to miss out on the party, or I'm going to miss out on binge watching another TV show. So sleep has become compromised horribly through this chaotic lifestyle. And, a hunter-gatherer analysis, or a hunter-gatherer sort of method of looking at sleep would say, go to sleep when the sun goes down and arise when the sun comes up. Set your sleep environment to a dark room, relatively cool, a cool sleeping surface covered with a skin, no artificial light, sound that is appropriate, whether it's white noise or no noise. And yet people don't do that. And so this is another, if you just looked at the hunter-gatherer experience of sleep, you would see that our bodies expect us to get a lot more sleep than we do. And in fact, a lot of the people in the paleo world now have been bragging about how much sleep they get, on a regular basis. And I'm one of those. I mean, if I don't get 8.5, I feel like I've shortchanged myself.
Yeah. Right.
So sleep would be that. And then I just, we could go on and on and on about how many different areas of our lives can be impacted by this current chaos of civilization. But I think the interconnectedness, the internet, the cell phones, the personal devices are so enthralling and so engaging on one level, but they take us out of the human experience and connection. Eye contact and actual conversations between two people that don't involve texts on a phone and shortcuts with communication. So I think if we look at the hunter-gatherer experience, which was to spend meal times around a campfire or around something and enjoying the food and appreciating the food and having discussions and telling stories. I mean, part of the human experience is telling stories. And again, not in some LOL, OMFG sort of, experience, but really to describe experiences and to use this tool that we have in our brain to create pictures that other people can relate to through human connection, not through internet connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And I guess one of the things that I was angling at a little bit with the chaos and order side of things is that I imagine as an opinion leader and using the mediums that you have done, certainly as far as I'm concerned, you're one of the first bloggers that I used to follow. So blogging obviously is a new thing, but you have thousands, probably millions of people now that have engaged on your blog. I don't know if I'm overshooting it there, but I imagine you're getting a lot of people with very complex medical conditions saying, "Oh, what should I do about this?" with some kind of polysyllabic condition.
Yes.
And quite often the answer is the same. They need to sleep more and move more and eat better and so on. Is that what you find? Yeah.
100%. No, 100%. I mean, we now, there's some 75 autoimmune disorders, and some of them have really complex names. And so many of them have some dietary etiology. So many of them go back to, look, some choices you made were probably inappropriate for your condition. And if you were to, remove some of these offending foods from your diet, you would get, if not complete resolution, certainly some measurable amount of relief through this. And again, it's
sure.
The human body is a complex but very wet machine. We are still, if you look at the development and civilization, geez, man, we're 2.5 million years old as a species, and we only have, if you go back 500 years, we were digging in the dirt with, pointed sticks and barely starting to build things. So the amount of complexity that we've layered on our lives just in the last 500 years, let alone the last 10,000 since agriculture, has not allowed us a lot of time to evolve and change and adapt to this new environment and this new, way of living that we've forced upon ourselves. So when in doubt, go back to the genetic model, which basically says, how did we get here in terms of evolution? What do our genes expect of us? And then, and I know you know this to be true, every scientific biological study that comes down the path these days looks at gene expression. What happened in light of gene expression when we introduced these variables and we did this controlled study, right? So that's just a commonality in the last probably 15 years that not all studies looked at 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now they all look at gene expression because they all know that that's really the level at which whatever is happening in the body is manifesting itself through the turning on or turning off of certain genes.
Yeah, so this whole sort of epigenetic phenomenon that has become sort of popularized by, I think Bruce Lipton was one of the first people to talk about it, wasn't he?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
You got to. And no, it's exactly. Speaking of which, there are a number of people that I have followed over my years, and Lipton is certainly one of them.
I was going to ask who some sort of key inspirations for you because in those early days. I don't know when did you start your blog? What year was that?
2006, which seems so long ago now, but it's not really.
Yeah. Were there people? Were there people? That you really sort of looked to, like Bruce Lipton or others, more specifically in the paleo field or evolutionary biology that you were inspired by?
Well, the term paleo didn't even really emerge until the early, maybe late 1990s, early 2000s. I mean, certainly Richard Dawkins, The Selfish Gene, The Blind Watchmaker. Those were very influential books for me as someone who had a fascination early on with evolution. Robert Sapolsky wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it was amazing. It just sort of opened up a whole realm of exploration for me. Art Devaney was one of the first bloggers who I followed in this evolutionary pathway, who sort of, he had a unique set of skills, which was he was a mathematician who was also very interested in gene expression and he applied a lot of math to fractal patterns to eating and to movement and to power laws and things like that no one had really sort of made the connection that it's all math, right? So,
yeah.
At some point. So, in fact, my first 2 blog posts were guest posts on Art Devaney's site. So before I ever started Mark's Daily Apple, I'd written 2 articles. One of which was on high-level athletics and stress that he posted and got such good response from his audience that I at that point decided I would start my own blog. So those were sort of my early inspirations.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess as you say, it's been about 14 years or so, 15 years since the paleo movement started to blossom a little bit and obviously got a lot of traction, I imagine, by about sort of 2010, 2011.
Yes.
Was that the time it started to explode for you? Yeah. So since then, of course, many different names have come onto the scene. Is there anyone that you particularly look to at the moment, say, oh, this guy is really on it, or information you've found really helpful for your own understanding?
No, for sure. I mean, Rob Wolf is a good friend of mine, and we are very simpatico and hang out. At events. We don't hang out, as much as I'd like for us to socially, but we've, I think, sort of maintained very similar trajectories in terms of how we view the world and the adjustments that we might make in our own way of thinking based on recent science. And he's, he's a really adept, high-level thinker. He does not accept as dogmatic everything that gets put up on the internet.
Yeah, good.
Chris Kresser is another one. Chris is more in the medical field, and Chris has some great insights and ideas on how the body works, and really as a clinician, he really digs deeply and wants to get into the details. So he really wants to figure out what it is specifically for each individual or each organism that is causing, whatever the problem happens to be. So he would be one who starts, at a high level with a template, but then really drills down and is I think, a very astute investigator in that regard. And beyond that, I mean, there are a number of people who I see at these at the expos and shows who are speaking, who have helped popularize what we do. I mean, the latest sort of is the latest movement now, even beyond keto, is the carnivore diet.
Yes.
So a lot of people are really speaking highly of the carnivore diet. I'm holding my analysis for more data, but Paul Saldino he's an MD who's talking a lot about the carnivore diet, and he was a vegan for a while, and that didn't work for him. And it wasn't because he had some philosophical bent. He just wanted to improve his health, and he was open to these different things. Well, he went from vegan to carnivore, and has had such great results. He's now doing that with his patients and clients.
Right.
So, but there are a lot of people. I mean, I would like to think that with Mark's Daily Apple coming out in 2006 and the Primal Blueprint coming out in 2009, my book, it opened the door for a lot of people to start their blogs and start, offering their own hypotheses and doing their own experiments.
Yeah, for sure. Have you, across the last 10 years or so, have you seen different ideas sort of come and go within the paleo world? Have there been any mistakes made, do you think, where people have kind of gone down a certain rabbit hole and really been pushing it, and then realized actually maybe that was a little too enthusiastic?
That's an interesting question. I think the biggest broad mistake is this, again, this notion that there is one dogmatic right way.
Sure.
And that people should adhere to this one way. And I think some people are looking for the answer to be, well, there's only one way. Mm-hmm. And so the biggest mistake for the longest time was adhering to this paleo dogma, part of which said, for instance, early on, that saturated fats are not good for you. And then it came back that, well, maybe saturated fats are fine and they're allowable. And so then, people started eating way too much saturated fat. So now the pendulum has sort of swung back and forth as we refine at least the advice that's based around the template.
Sure.
So, and I've seen that in keto where people are like, okay, when I'm keto, I can eat whatever I want and as much as I want. And so they're sort of missing, the concept of keto, which is literally, in my estimation anyway, is to allow you to get by on far fewer calories more efficiently and without compromise to your health.
Yeah, right. I was at the Ancestral Health Symposium, the first one they did, I think it was 2012, and you were there. And I remember Lauren Cordain was standing up, and it was exactly that discussion about saturated fats. And someone said, because he was one of the early proponents of minimizing saturated fats,
exactly.
And was talking about various wild game and so on having very low saturated fats, and obviously trying to make that fit with the sort of heart hypothesis that was prevalent at the time. And someone asked him, where are you at with that now? And he said, well, look, as a scientist, I sort of reserve the right to change my mind based on the evidence. And and it was a big round of applause, and I thought it was fantastic, actually. It was really, really good to see that. But I kind of saw a similar thing in running with the whole barefoot thing and how people, that because of this whole discussion about persistence hunting and people doing, long distance running to take down an antelope or whatever, that so of course the endurance runners love that and like, this is the way we were evolved to work. And also I think the notion that because particularly Lieberman, Dan Lieberman from Harvard was the key guy, wasn't he, that was promoting it, still is promoting this. And I think the assumption, therefore, is that everyone's an endurance runner. But you can see from the build of some people that we're really not at that stage now. I mean, maybe our ancestors were endurance runners, but clearly not everyone's an endurance runner now. So is that something you've seen as well, sort of fitness trends?
No, it's a great example because, when McDougall came out with Born to Run, and it was about the same time that Vibram was introducing their five-fingered shoes. A classic example, enough runners said, wow, this is a great idea. It explains a lot. I'm going to go out and buy some minimalist shoes, and I'm going to run 7 miles the first day. And lo and behold, they ruined their plantar fascia, their Achilles, or something happened because they weren't adapted, to that form of movement yet. So
Sure.
A great example of how, mistakes are made because we glom on to some new notion that sounds great and sounds like it might have some basis in fact or in science or in evolution. But the reality is we are far removed, not just genetically in terms of familial genetics and regional genetics. Like you say, I mean, you take a stocky Northern European family that goes back many generations, you're right. They're probably not great endurance material, but they might be, awesome for covering, craggy, rocky ground with their herds for, all day long, moving around at a low level of activity. And of course, as we know, manifesting that varied range of motion in stronger ligaments and connective tissue than, say, a modern genetically gifted runner in the United States who just runs on paved roads all day long in a in a straight line, never altering the gait, never moving side to side, creating an adapted machine that can run a 2:10 marathon, but that couldn't play tennis or ski or snowboard without getting a massive injury.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So I just went off on a tangent there, but
No, that's cool.
But that's the sort of thing that when you hear that something, some new paleo intervention is the be all and the end all, be somewhat wary of what it is.
Well, one of the things I used to explain, because I was involved with the Vibram Five Fingers here in the UK, was that I had a slide which was kind of showing someone on a tightrope, and on one side they're holding like a balance bar, and on one side they had phylogeny, which was evolution of species, and then on the other side they had ontogeny, which is the evolution of the individual. And so I was always sort of making the point that you may be very highly adapted to run around barefoot from a phylogeny perspective, from an evolutionary perspective. But in terms of what you've done and how you've grown up, wearing cushioned shoes your whole life, you're way behind on that side. So, you can't think that you can just jump into barefoot running or minimalist running and instantly adapt, because that's the evolutionary story. There's more to it than that. You've got to think of your own evolution, your own sort of heritage.
Absolutely. And most people who have this awakening in their 30s or 40s or 50s after they've done decades of I wouldn't call it necessarily damage, but maybe I would call it damage, whether it was metabolic damage or physiological damage, the way they've moved. And then to think that they can, because of their phylogeny, they can undo that, quickly. It doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. So tell us about the sort of business side of being involved in paleo, because I know obviously you have many books, you've got a range of supplements and foods as well. You've got various training courses and obviously the blog and the podcasts. I mean, you've got a lot going on. Let's start out. How many people are in your organization?
Well, probably 80 now.
Wow. Yeah.
Now the food company I just sold to Kraft Heinz in January this year. So I don't own that. I still work for the company, and I all of my former employees still run that company. It's just owned by Kraft Heinz. And then and that's been a very rewarding experience to create products that I had written about and wished existed in the marketplace, but did not exist. So I had to create them myself. And the response, the consumer response to those has been overwhelming and made it one of the most successful food launches in the U.S. in a long time.
Wow. Great.
The books, I continue to write books. I don't publish myself anymore. I have a great relationship with Harmony Books in New York. So I publish. My most recent book was the Keto Reset Diet, and I've done a couple of keto cookbooks, and then I have one coming out the end of this year on keto longevity, using the keto strategy for increasing your lifespan and your health span.
Right.
And then I have a health coaching business, which has really taken off in the past few years, Primal Health Coach and the Primal Health Coach Institute. And so we certify people to become life coaches, health coaches through this organization. My intention there was always to take what I know in my brain and be able to leverage it with other people, because I feel like this technology, if you will call it that, this intellectual property, this strategy of living is so powerful and available to anyone, but it does require quite often a close one-to-one relationship with a teacher or a coach or an instructor, who can go into your house and help you clean out your refrigerator, clean out your pantry, and go shopping with you and show you how to shop for the right kinds of foods, and go to the gym with you and show you some appropriate movements, go to a restaurant with you and show you how to order off of any menu in a way that does not sabotage your eating strategies. So we've had over 3,000 people have gone through the course now. And it's really gratifying to see not just, that number of people who believe in the system and believe in the concept of primal living, but have also had phenomenal and major impacts on people around them, whether it's their clients or their family or their friends or themselves. So I think we have like 8 people working for that organization now. And I've just, look, my goal from day one was to change the way the world views health. I wanted to affect the lives of 100 million people in terms of accessing better health and getting themselves off that grid, off that, health and insurance-based, I want to talk treadmill, but it's basically a conveyor belt in the U.S., and take back control of their own health from with some very simple lifestyle strategies. That was basically all I ever wanted to do. And so I've just chosen to do it through the blog, through seminars, through books, through coaching, and now through creating food products that most of my customers are people, most of my food customers are people who've never heard of me, but have been looking for a clean sauce or condiment or dressing to put on their food, and finally pick up the bottle and go, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And then that gets them into understanding more about, other things they can do to achieve good health through eating choices.
Fantastic. That's great. And so how many of these health coaches are outside of the US? Are you expanding quite widely globally?
Yeah, we have, I would say 30% of our coaches are outside the US. It's an online learning experience. It's a very robust course. I mean, we have 150,000 words of text. We've got 40, 50, 60 hours of video. It's a very, again, it takes about 15 weeks to get through the course. Mm-hmm. It's got an exam that you have to pass at the end of every module. It's 15 modules. We go into business building techniques. We go into a lot of other strategies, advanced coaching strategies, and things like that, well beyond the science. But we've had doctors take it, MDs, chiropractors, physical therapists, nurses assistants, physician assistants, things like that. Everybody who's taken it thinks it's like one of the more robust courses they've taken.
So, Mark, you were saying that you've got one of your goals is to hit 100 million people that you want to influence, you want to touch with your work.
Yes.
Is that something that you have always had that as a goal, or is that something that has kind of evolved as you've developed your business?
No, it's evolved for sure. I started out wanting to reach 1 million people on my blog. Within a year or two, I realized that was going to be, I wouldn't say an easy goal, but that was going to come up pretty quickly. And so I added a zero to that.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, my mission was to affect the lives of 10 million people through my teachings. And the way I wanted to measure this was I wanted to allow people a means by which they could access better health and take themselves off the medical conveyor belt and off the insurance system that has become such a abject failure in the U.S. And that meant learning how to eat right and how to move right and how to sleep and how to manifest excellent health without the requirement of a physician or the medical system. So, and then but a few years ago, I just said, wait a minute, I'm coming up on 10 million already with my books and my seminars and my millions of monthly visitors to Mark's Daily Apple. So let me add another zero. So then I punched it up to 100 million, and that became that. Now that's these are not just sort of ephemeral, like, oh, I'll just put a big goal out there and it doesn't matter if I hit it or not. I really want to hit that number, and how I want to hit that number is through the coaching program. I want to leverage, as I said, my expertise with my thousands of coaches who then go out in the world and teach that. But another way was with the food company. With food, if somebody who has never heard of paleo or primal or keto or anything like that, but is still looking to get the best possible sauces, dressings, and condiments and toppings to put on their food, if they pick up one of my food products and then read a little bit about what they're consuming, that might pique their curiosity enough to understand or to learn more about other types of food, and that's sort of a backdoor way of getting them into paleo, primal, keto, low carb, real food eating, whatever it might be. So the number is now 100 million.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Yeah, part of the reason I asked is that in our paper, in one of our papers, we referenced another paper which was talking about allostatic load, which of course is the kind of overall stress on the body. And it was saying that purpose in life predicts allostatic load 10 years down the line. And so, of course, if you've got purpose, then what it's showing is it actually decreases the stress on the body. So obviously it's a key part of sort of healthy living and realizing your potential. So fantastic. You've got that 100 million as the next goal, as it were.
And it's interesting to me that people, some people today don't have a purpose, don't have a sense of what they want in life. I know, there's this whole biohacking community, and one of their stated goals is, some of them say, well, I want to live forever. Wouldn't that be awesome to live forever? And I'm like, wait a minute, if you don't have a purpose to get up in the morning, why would you want to live forever? What is there about living forever that implies immediately some sort of quality of life? Living, to me, I want every day that I do live to be full of, joy, fulfillment, contentment, happiness, whatever. And I think you have to have a purpose in order to, just to be able to measure that.
Yeah. It also strikes me it's not very paleo to live forever, is it?
No, exactly. Well, but the irony there is, the whole concept of evolution is that, we're just a bizarre manifestation of two strands of RNA, the primordial ooze that had a tendency to want to replicate. Mm-hmm. So humans today, we're still just these, wet machines that are doing whatever they can to pass the genetic material along to another generation. Full stop.
Yeah. That's it. Okay, so look, one of the things that we had a conversation about early on when we were talking about writing these papers together was an Achilles injury that you'd had. And can you tell me a bit more about how that came on and what you did to resolve it?
Sure. So I don't run distance anymore, but I do sprints. I do beach sprints. I'll go to the track sometimes and run sprints. I play a game called Ultimate Frisbee. And Ultimate is one of the greatest games ever invented. It's very fast paced. It's played basically on a soccer pitch. It's lots of stop and go, lots of changing direction, lots of jumping, lots of sprinting, sometimes for 2 hours. It's the best workout I do all week. And it's the most fun I have all week. Don't tell my wife that. And yet, over the years, as I play this game with 20-somethings and 30-somethings, and I'm 60-something now, I noticed that my Achilles were starting to get tender, painful, and thickened. And I was developing a tendinopathy called Achilles tendinosis. And it got to the point where I couldn't play anymore because I couldn't sprint without tremendous pain and stiffness. I had this sort of haunting feeling that if I jumped more than a foot off the ground, that I would snap both Achilles. So I went to see some of the best orthopedic surgeons in the world in Los Angeles. Of course, the diagnosis there was you have this severe tendinopathy, and the only cure for it is for us to slit open the backs of your heels and scrape down the Achilles and wrap you up in a cast for 3 months, and then you'll do 9 months of rehab, and maybe you'll get back to 80 or 85% of where you were. Well, that did not sit well with me at all. I went back to the drawing board. I realized that much of what we do in life has to do with how we offer the raw materials for our body to rebuild, renew, regenerate, recreate, repair itself on a day-to-day basis based on stresses and based on the access to these raw materials. And I realized I had not had access to collagen building, collagen repairing raw materials. Even though I was paleo, I was not eating the parts of an animal that would supply the collagen peptides, the glycine, the proline, the hydroxyproline, these unique amino acids that I would say unique. They're prevalent in skin, hair, nails, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, fascia, and all this connective tissue. And without these raw materials, the body has to go to kind of plan B. And plan B, in terms of my Achilles, was basically my body saying, look, if we don't have the building blocks to go repair your Achilles and make them even stronger as a result of the stresses, then we're going to have to make do with what we have. And we can build some scar tissue there, and we can thicken your Achilles, and we can prevent or at least protect you from immediate trauma, but it's going to be less pliable. It might snap, but that's plan B. And I'm like, well, can you hear me talking to my body now? It's just, I didn't mean to put it in that context, but so anyway, I said, well, look, I have to have access to collagen. It's why bone broth has become so popular in the last few years. Bone broth is a great source of collagen. For most of human history, we had access to lots of collagen and gelatin. We ate, nose to tail, but we don't anymore. We eat the choice cuts of meat, and that's it. And without access to the glycine, the proline, the hydroxyproline, we get large amounts of methionine. And methionine in muscle meat, helps us build muscle and does a number of wonderful things, but also interferes and takes up the glycine from the collagen parts of our body as part of this metabolism. And so historically, we ate the whole part of the animal where there was a lot of glycine, a lot of these other amino acids in the collagen. Historically, even when we didn't eat the whole animal, we were eating Jell-O. Jell-O was a dessert in the U.S. for 50 years that kids had and mothers made. Aspic and all sorts of not just desserts, but dishes out of. Or many women in this country took Knox gelatin. It was available, and they took it theoretically for their skin, hair, and nails because it made for wonderful, lustrous hair and lustrous skin and long nails. But it was also benefiting fascia and ligaments and tendons and other connective tissue. Well, those have disappeared in the last couple of decades, and so now we've come to a point where we see it in sports a lot, where there are a lot of connective tissue injuries. There are a lot of tendinopathies or ruptured tendons. There are a lot of ACLs, MCLs. There are a lot of things that are happening in orthopedics that I think are a result of this dearth, this lack of this raw material that you can use to rebuild connective tissue. So in my case, I realized this, and I started taking 30 to 40 grams of a collagen peptide, a collagen hydrolysate, every day. And in 4 months, I effectively cured my Achilles tendons. They went back to normal. It's been 5.5 or 6 years now. I'm sprinting well. Knock wood. I think my Achilles are probably the strongest part of my body now. And so I became a huge believer in this notion that you consume like for like. If you want to build muscle, you eat muscle meat. If you want to build collagen and connective tissue, you eat collagen and connective tissue, or at least the amino acids that are prevalent in those. If you want to build bone, you eat eggshells and bone meal as a source of calcium. I mean, it's not some airy fairy woo woo kind of concept that it's based in science. This is access to these raw materials. It's one of the reasons that for instance, pea protein is not a great source of protein if you're a bodybuilder and you want to be a vegan bodybuilder, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Oh, well, we referenced some of those kinds of papers about collagen absorption and so on in our own paper. So yeah, it's like you say, the science is there. It's not just you trying it out and it's seeming to work. It's the research is there to back it, right? Good stuff. So I guess it's a really interesting example of how something that is almost too simple to believe for someone who's done an entire medical degree and become like you say, a top surgeon, some of the best surgeons in the world, and they're saying, let's cut you open, when something as simple as actually eating what the tendons are made out of was enough to fix you. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
Well, it's not just incredible, it's scary. It's scary that that happens millions of times a day in the world. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, well, so we obviously wrote these 2 papers together for the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. And part of the reason I'd approached you was that, of course, you've got a fantastic reputation in the paleo sphere. But what I found was that, in my experience, I wasn't seeing as many of my colleagues in the field of osteopathy and physiotherapy and chiropractic really sort of taking to the paleo information that's out there and applying it with their clients. It still almost seems a little bit left of field for them. Whereas the people that I know that are much more, training oriented and strength conditioning coaches, they seem to have embraced it far more. Has that been your experience in terms of what you've seen?
Pretty much. Yeah. I think people who are hands-on working in the field for, an hour at a time with clients, who have the time to not just manipulate and guide the patient or the client through, whatever activities they're doing, but have the time to talk about diet, talk about sleep, talk about sun exposure. And it just, to me, it seems like people who are in sort of these alternative therapies have a mindset that opens them up to alternative therapies and other alternative therapies versus a traditional medical setting where a doctor might get your results of your test back and go, well, your blood work is back and your cholesterol is a little high and, your iron's a little low. So I would say you need to eat better and maybe exercise a little bit more. Well, what does a patient do with that? They don't do anything. Yeah. So I think that's the typical, medical experience. Now, what I'm seeing, and it's very gratifying, I'm seeing a lot of MDs now who have embraced paleo and have embraced this new movement, which suggests that there's a lot more that we could do besides surgery and radiation and drugs, that we can actually intervene with diet in a way that manifests outcomes that are not possible through even drug interventions. So I think I'm seeing a whole kind of fringe group of MDs. There's a company called Steady MD, and they're an online. You can access an online physician who is like-minded with your philosophy, who is simpatico. So you can find a paleo physician. Then when you bring them your blood work and your total cholesterol is 230, but your HDL is 85, they don't go off the deep end and crazy and say we're going to put you on statins. Right. They basically go, oh, that's great. Look at you, man, and your triglycerides are 45. You're killing it, right? So I'm seeing some of these doctors, and I think it's just going to, I think it's going to trend more and more in that direction. So that's that's kind of the good news. But right now, it's frustrating to see people who have real medical issues and then go see a traditional doctor and then get sort of put on that conveyor belt that has medicine and like the classic is you have type 2 diabetes. And your doctor says, well, I don't really, if you want to keep eating your dessert, you can, as long as you take your meds.
Yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? Oh dear, yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned, the sort of duration that people spend with their clients, because one of the papers that I actually wrote previously for the Journal of Bodywork was called "But You're Infinitely More Complex Than a Car," and so bizarre title in a way, but where I led the readers was that the sort of standard, let's say 5-10 minutes you spend with your doctor, or even maybe like 30 minutes with a chiropractor or someone, your body is infinitely more complex than a car, and yet you would never leave your car with someone for a full service for 30 minutes or for 5 minutes. So it's just crazy that we devalue our bodies to that degree, that we think that something as complex as a human body can be fixed in 5 or 10 minutes, where really, if you can spend the time coaching people, and this really seems to be the key thing, isn't it? Is coaching them to empower them to greater health rather than giving them the pill or the surgery or whatever it is.
Well, and this is where the one-on-one really becomes important, because, as a physical therapist, you watch people move. You watch their reaction to certain ranges of motion, and when they wince, because, their arm is back in a position where maybe the fascia is adhered to the deltoid. And that's the reason they're, it's not that they have some, torn labrum or some, rotator cuff issue. It's basically some simple thing that, well, not simple, but it's something that's happened that a normal physician might not even recognize. And yet you see it in real time. You see the wincing, and then you say, well, maybe there's a dysfunction here that we can fix and manipulate with stretching and with hypervolt or whatever modality we're using in the office here, versus a surgeon who might say, well, geez, that's indicative of a torn labrum and bursitis. We're gonna have to go in there and cut. But that's because they haven't spent time and haven't seen this complex machine, as you describe it, go through its various iterations and machinations throughout the day. But you spend an hour with somebody in a physical therapy setting, you learn a lot about them, not just, by the way, from their movement, but from their discussing about what's going on in their personal life and their diet. And, you really do get to see the whole patient.
Yeah, for sure. Great stuff. So we've obviously talked about how the paleo movement has unfolded over the last 10, 15 years. Where do you see it heading over the coming 10 or 15 years?
Well, I think we set ourselves up for great success. I don't know that it's called paleo much longer. I think paleo is sort of a moniker that served us well. It gave us a visual of a hunter-gatherer paradigm, and kind of allowed people to understand that our genes today have not really shifted much in the last 10,000 years. So that's good. And then I think what's happened is that modern genetic science has kind of taken over. And as I said, every study you see today refers to what happens at the level of gene expression. And that will kind of guide us into the next generation of ways in which we can manifest a strong, lean, fit, happy, healthy, productive, loving human organism using epigenetics as the key driver of this. And so, terms like epigenetics have kind of taken over from a paleo model. Real food has kind of taken over from the term paleo diet. As long as you're eating real food, I think you're well on your way to what you need, to do to get to 80% of what your optimal health is. But I feel pretty confident that we're headed in the right direction, and I feel very confident that we're not headed backwards. As you have said on occasion, we're coming full circle. It's really interesting that we would, use a tech platform to learn enough about our bodies to bring us back to an intuitive sense where we don't need the tech, because we feel we're in tune with the needs of our bodies and what we need to do to optimize health.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. And so, well, thank you very much for today. Thank you for your time. And where will people learn more about your work and your products and so on?
Sure. So marksdailyapple.com, that's the blog. Something new and exciting there every day for the last 14 years. That's good effort.
Yeah.
Lots of books that you can get on Amazon: The Primal Blueprint, the Primal Connection, Primal Endurance. Are you detecting a theme here?
Yeah.
The Keto Reset Diet, a bunch of cookbooks, all good stuff. If you want to find out about our food products, go to primalkitchen.com. We have a lot of very tasty and good for you products there. And then ultimately, if you want to be a health coach, the Primal Health Coach Institute is where we teach people how to become certified primal health coaches. Lots of information there, lots of webinars and things you can get for free and learn about the program, whether this is something you want to do.
And how long does that training take generally? Is there a specific time, or is it?
Well, people can get through it in as little as 4 months now, but it's a very robust program. It's an online experience. There's no face-to-face. It's all done online. There's 150,000 words of text. There's probably 30 or 40 hours of videos. There's an exam that you take at the end of every module in order to move on to the next module. We've had doctors, we've had chiropractors, nurses, physician's assistants, trainers. Lots of people go through the program and rave about it. So it's highly recommended. If you're in the health field and you want to get certified as a primal health coach, that's the place to go.
Awesome. Fantastic. And one thing with regards to your food products, you have collagen in some of those products?
We have several products with collagen. I was such a fan of collagen. We have bars that you can take that have collagen in them, and we have several different drinks. We have a turmeric sort of coffee and tea additive. We've got vanilla flavored, coffee creamer that has collagen in it. Chocolate. We've got regular collagen peptides. We have a lot of collagen.
Wow.
Can you tell I'm a big fan of collagen there?
Sounds tasty. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for joining me on From Chaos to Order. It's been great to have you on today. And no doubt our paths will be crossing down the line. So thanks again for your time. And,
my pleasure, Matt. Take care.
See you soon. Thank you for listening to FC2O. If you enjoyed that and found it useful, please do feel free to share it with your friends, colleagues, and loved ones. Now, I mentioned that Mark has a really generous offer for FC2O listeners, and this is that you can lock in a $500 tuition discount if you register for Mark's Primal Health Coach program within a week of the podcast publish date, which means you've got through to July the 6th to do that. All you have to do is to cite MATT500, so that's Matt in caps, MATT, and then 500 in numerals, when enrolling into the program. Now, to learn more, you can visit primalhealthcoach.com/webinar. This gives you instant access to a free webinar that Mark held with Master Coach Christine Hassler, in which they explain how you can turn your passion for health, wellness, and for helping other people into a thriving business by becoming a health coach. It also details the steps to take to become trained, certified, and successful. You can also access the papers that Mark and I wrote for free until July the 4th at mattwallden.com under the podcast tab. I'll also be offering a free webinar on July the 12th where I touch on the content of the papers called Modern Disintegration, Primal Connectivity. So take a look at that. That's all there on mattwallden.com. Thank you for joining me, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.